Hey, and welcome to our Unpresentable Parts podcast, Eve edition. I am Sam Blake.
Hey, and I'm Jasmine Cherry.
Awesome. Well, we aim to make the unpresentable presentable. And so before we jump into our podcast, we will do our normal ritual or tradition, whatever you want to call it, and share what we find this week or today unpresentable about us. And to just really start off being vulnerable in that way and opening up that space for whoever is listening as well. So I'll begin. I
Okay.
think what is the unpresentable part for me is this constant. It's a constant for me. It's that I tend to carry anxiety with me no matter what. It's and I think this week and this past week I hadn't been feeling well, which added to my anxiety because there are things I needed to do that I didn't get done. So feeling behind on some things. And so I think the unpresentable thing for me is when that anxiety comes that I really haven't spent a lot of time in prayer. I haven't
Mm,
really taken my anxious thoughts and given them to God. And so I think that's it for me. It's coming into even here today, knowing, hey, Sam, you really didn't take the time to kind of get rid of some of this nervous energy, this
mm,
anxious energy that you've been carrying for the last few days. So I think
mm.
that's it for me.
Gotcha. Thanks, Sam. Actually, I will kind of ride on the back of that. For me, I do think I have definitely seen a difference in just my prayer life and my connection with God from last week, even to this week. And so I would say that that would be, maybe one of the unpresentable things, but just needing to make sure that I know that I need God. And I know sometimes when I'm probably too busy being in the driver's seat and trying to get things done that I can kind of forget about God, but making sure I'm involving Him with everything, right?
Hmm.
The Holy Spirit, just everything. So yeah, I was thinking about that. Like, what is going on? What's happening? So I want to be more connected and just making sure God, practicing that presence of God, right? He's everywhere. He's here with me. So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Jazz. And I think when we're connected with God, everything's right in the world. And when we're not, there's that, it just things seem a little off. You just
Mm,
it's not
true.
plugging in. So I appreciate you sharing that. And for anyone who is feeling that, my thoughts for you and my hope for you is that you'll take some time to pray and connect with God so that really honestly things can feel right with the world again. Okay. So
Amen.
this is super exciting. We are actually going to start a three-part series called Resilience, Voices in the Shadows, Resilience, Redemption, and Unconventional Faith. And so I am super excited because one of the things I love, love, love about doing this Unpresentable Parts Eve edition is we get to talk about women and women in the Bible. And today we are actually going to focus on Hagar. And the episode title is Unseen No More, Hagar's Journey
Mm,
of Redemption. And I don't know if you guys know much about Hagar, but really her story does resonate for me. And it resonates for anyone who's been through a lot. So if you've been through a lot, you can connect with this woman. I love how God gives us these characters in the Bible that we get to hear their journey, their life story, and it's
mm-hmm.
not always perfect and it's not always pretty, and it's relatable. It's relatable.
Yep.
So here is this woman, Hagar. She was a foreigner, she was a slave, and she was mistreated. Just she is incredibly. Here's the cool thing about Hagar that I love this. She actually is an important figure in Judaism, in
Mm,
Christianity, and in Islam. This woman is in all three of those books, and in the Torah, in the of the Christian Bible, and
hmm.
the why can I not for the life of me remember
Quran?
the Quran? Thank you. And I just think, wow, this woman's life had major impact. It impacts so many different people in so many different
Mm,
walks of
true.
life, and even different strands of religion. So she is super inspiring to me, and really her experiences resonates for many women who've survived abuse or struggling.
Mm,
And I love that about her character. It's so broad, it's so big, it's so relatable. And honestly, as a Black woman in America, it's relatable for me. I just,
mm,
it is some of what I read about her. It's so hard. It's so hard, but it's so inspiring to see her go through that and the way she goes
hmm,
through it, and just
hmm.
what God allows us to learn about her. So I'm particularly moved by her. So
Yeah.
were you, how familiar are you with Hagar?
Hmm. Hagar, I feel like just in my journey, I do feel like Hagar wasn't talked about as much. She was, for sure, but I feel like there are not many. She was not necessarily a focal point of a lesson or focal point if we were in a Bible study and let's kind of dive in deeper and get to know her and in all the different angles. And what you said in the beginning, Sam, when you said she's a foreigner, she was a slave, she was mistreated, I'm like, is that not Black people in America? What? As, as
Mm-hmm.
soon as you said that, I said, "Oh my
Mm-hmm.
gosh, yes." So we can
Mm-hmm.
definitely understand even that layer today. But no, it was she was never like a focal point. Yeah. So, but I know the basic facts about her, but never kind of let's maybe dive in a little bit deeper, see even how she was feeling, and kind of stepping
Yes.
into her shoes. I don't think that was, just wasn't a thing, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we hear a lot about it, many women in the Bible, but you're right. Hagar is not a focal point. We tend to focus on Abraham and Sarah, don't really tend to focus
Yeah.
on her as much. And here's this woman, here is Hagar, just background wise, she has no power because, as we said, she was a slave, she was a foreigner,
Mm,
she has no power. But here's the cool thing about Hagar, she is actually the first person in scripture to be visited by an angel of God.
mm, it's pretty cool.
How cool about that? And she's the only person in scripture to give God a name.
Mm,
That blows me away because from the very beginning, it shows the character of God, right? All through the Bible, God's character is He is for the foreigner, He is for the
mm-hmm.
mistreated. He He empowers women,
Yeah.
in a very patriarchal system. Religiously, we've experienced the patriarchy a lot, and we tend to put on God that, oh, we put this negativity on him, when the truth of the matter is God has been a champion of women from the very beginning.
Mm,
And
yeah.
this story of Hagar really, it's super inspiring to see her, but to see God, really, because it's
Mm-hmm.
really this whole story of Hagar shows us God's grace and God's love. It is believed, though, that Hagar was a gift to Abraham and Sarah uh,
Mm,
when they were in Egypt. And if you are able to read, as you listen to this podcast, pull out your Bible and read Genesis 16, and
mm-hmm.
you will get to understand, or well, get familiar with the story of Hagar a bit. It starts a lot there. But here there was this woman who was a gift. She was given to someone as an inanimate object. Here's this human being given to
Mm,
someone,
right.
while I believe while they were in Egypt and as they were leaving, she was a gift giving, based on what is historically written. But
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask you a question. And this is really important because I asked another person this, and I've asked two people this, and it's very interesting the answer I get. When you, if you close your eyes for a second,
Hmm.
what do you visualize? Hagar and Sarah and Abraham, what do you visualize that they look like?
Hmm. Question. Hmm. Do I visualize they look? That's a great question. I don't think, Sam, I've ever thought about that ever. What do they look like? I'm always thinking they were brown skin, right? They're out up in this
Mm-hmm.
desert, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Um, and I'm yeah, I'm just like, what did people how did they dress? How was their hair? How was all those things? What did they wear on their feet? What did Abraham did, because sometimes when I think of biblical times and what maybe a king would look like, right? But at
Mm-hmm.
this stage, Abraham was not. So it's like, what did he look like? That's good. Um, I don't know,
I,
but I
I,
would assume, especially since they lived longer, they probably still look good and healthy, you
yeah,
know?
and I asked that question, Jazz, because this is so important. Because I started asking little kids those questions.
Uh,
When you read children's Bibles,
mm-hmm.
what do Adam and Eve look like?
Yeah. They've definitely always been fair skinned, for sure.
Okay. And I,
And maybe long hair.
yes, I asked that question because that is so important. Our
Mm-hmm.
paradigm. When I
Mm-hmm.
thought of Hagar and when I thought of Bible characters, I didn't see me
Mm.
because from the very beginning, the indoctrination very early on, religion didn't have a place for me.
Yeah. Yep.
And this is important because for anyone who is brown or maybe Middle Eastern people have more of a sense of seeing themselves, but for so many
Mm.
people outside of the Middle East, who are outside of that area, who had the Bible introduced to them, it sometimes doesn't feel very. The ability to connect to it is hard because it's spoken from a place of we are still foreigners. That
Mm.
only the, the vision, the visual that is given from very young is it
Yep.
doesn't show me. I couldn't imagine Hagar looking like me.
Mm.
And so in my adult years and as I have grown in my faith and I've learned and I realized, wait, this woman could have looked exactly like me.
Yeah.
And this
True.
was not, when we start talking about she was a slave, maybe some people can envision her that way, but I didn't see her that way. But funny enough, always envisioned Sarah as white.
Mm. Mm.
And really, we're probably talking about two brown women here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is
Mm-hmm.
really important because kind of changing the paradigm. Why do I bring that up? Because it's important because sometimes we have a Western mindset into
Sure.
what we're reading. And I think if we can place ourselves in it and realize, no, this was cultural. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't so much racial as it was cultural.
Yeah.
And here you've got
Mm.
this patriarchal culture. You've got these people in this system, and Hagar is in a system where she's been given to someone, she is a slave, she is a maid servant, handmaid, whatever you want to call it, and she is mistreated. And for anyone who hasn't read the story of Hagar, Abraham, and Sarah, just for a brief, it is, I'm not going to, for the sake of time, I don't really want to read all of it, but
Mm-hmm.
uh, the premise here is that this woman is given to Hagar, to Sarah and Abraham. She leaves with them. God gives Abraham a promise that he's going to have a child, that his descendants will outnumber the stars. and they're old and they're getting older and they're getting older and it's not happening. And Sarah is losing, you know, any confidence in this thing happening. She's getting older. Wait, what
Mhm.
is this thing God has said? And, uh, you know, I can't, it's good to even think through Sarah herself. We give her a bad rap, but she was also in a system. She was in
Mhm.
a system where her value depended on having heirs and male sons and, you know, she her status, everything. And
Yeah.
so this woman was going through a lot. We did a segment on her already, but here's Hagar. And Sarah's like, okay, well, if I can't have this, God's kind of taking too long. So Abraham, go ahead and sleep with her so
Mhm.
she can give me a child. Oh
Mhm.
my gosh, what a crazy system. I can't even imagine it. This isn't
Yeah.
even surrogacy that I am Hagar's volunteering. She doesn't have a
Yeah.
choice. She doesn't have a
Right.
choice. She is in a system that says you belong to me and your children are my property. They
Mm.
belong to me. So many
Yeah.
can relate to that in so many ways. And so here you have this woman who is mistreated. She has, you know, she sleeps with this man. And here's the thing, Hagar was probably really young, more than likely. And here you have this old man
Mhm.
who this was not, we tend to sugarcoat these things in the Bible and we don't really say it like it
Yeah.
is. But this wasn't consensual.
Man.
She didn't agree
Mhm.
to this. She didn't have a
Right.
choice.
Right. This was not in her job description.
This was
Hey.
not, you know. And so here
Mhm.
she is having to sleep with this man, be
Mhm.
forced, actually. Let's be clear about that. Again, God didn't condone that. That was part of the culture. That is part of the
Mhm.
system. You're owned. You don't have a choice. This is what I say you're going to do, and you're going to do it. So here you have
Yeah.
this woman who is put in this position. She gets pregnant, has, you know, and is now that she's pregnant, Sarah is ticked,
Mhm.
you know, because now everything she wanted, she's able to see in this young girl.
Mhm.
And now she's mad at
Yeah.
Abraham. She mad
Yeah.
about everything. Like,
Mhm.
what on earth? And Hagar, I think, to some degree, is probably feeling like, all right, look, I got what you want. I got what you want. You know? But and so Sarah, you're not gonna I am the big dog. So she's probably feeling some things. And obviously Sarah's like, yeah, nah, you gotta go.
Mhm.
And this is where we're gonna pick up. I'm actually gonna read it
Okay.
for because I know that so just so people can be familiar if you don't have your Bible, I will read Genesis 16, 7 through 14, and then you and I can talk through it from here.
Okay. Perfect.
Um, so 7, it says, the angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was the spring that is beside the road of Shur. And he said, Hagar, servant of Sarai, where do you come from and where are you going? I'm running away from my mistress Sarai, she answered. Then the angel of the Lord told her, go back to your mistress and submit to her. The angel added, I will so increase your descendants that they will be too numerous to count. The angel of the Lord also said to her, you are now a child and you will have a son. You shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. And he will live in hostility towards all his brothers. She gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. You are the God who sees me. For she said, I have now seen the one who sees me. That is why the well was called Ber Lahai Roy. It is still there between Kadesh and Bered.
Mm.
Okay, tons of stuff in here.
It
So let's talk
is.
about this desert encounter. Let's kind
Okay.
of discuss it a bit. She
Okay.
runs away and she is encountered by an angel of the Lord or the Lord at
Mhm.
this desert. So here's the thing. He asked her questions, but before he even asked
Mhm.
her questions, here's what he says. He says, Serve Hagar, servant of Sarah,
Mhm.
where have you come from and where are you going?
Yeah. I never got that, honestly. I'm like, well, you just called her out, God. You know where she's at, right? So you know where she's
Mm-hmm.
coming from, but maybe it was a deeper question he was asking. Because I was like, God, you know what's going on. Maybe Hagar don't know, so you're asking her, and then where is she going? She might not have a clue, but she's just trying to get out of there. As far as where she's going, but as running away, like her answer, like I'm just trying to get away from this woman mistreating me. You know, who knows? She gonna take it out on my child. We got to go. You know.
Yeah, I love that you said that, Jazz, because that's exactly it to some degree, right? Here is a woman. She is like, yo, where are you going? You're
Mm-hmm.
going to the desert. Where, like, are you thinking? Are you,
mm,
what's gonna happen? You're pregnant. Wait, maybe she was trying to go back to Egypt.
mm, mm.
Maybe she was
Yeah.
trying to go back to what she knew. And I really, as I read this, I think here's a woman. What is happening here is she's going to find and she's going to experience God's love for her. But right now she's running.
Yeah.
She's hurting. And isn't that what we do as women? Like when we're in grief, we're in our lizard brain. We can't process, we can't think. You're just acting. And here's this woman Hagar, which is doing exactly that in her grief. She's like,
Yes.
I just got to get back to what I know. I am leaving. I don't know where I'm going, but I'm taking my
Yeah.
stuff and I'm going with me.
Yeah.
And I think so many of us, we run, right? She ran.
Mm-hmm.
She
Yeah.
ran to
And
escape
if
the pressure.
when I think about the position she was in, I could feel like because it's also your fight or flight response, right?
Yes,
So she's
yes.
like, "Look, I can't take this anymore." I feel like the Bible doesn't outright say that she was, kind of taunting and being prideful in front of her. I would think, well, if you are a slave, I kind of feel like, wouldn't you be afraid to do that kind of stuff because of being reprimanded, right?
Mhm.
By your owners? So who knows? And maybe she did a little something like that behind the scenes where only she did it in front of only Sarah, who knows? But let's say she has some innocence in it. She could be like, look, y'all told me to do this. Okay, I didn't want to do it. Y'all commanded me. I'm following the orders. Get pregnant. It's not my fault. And then it's just a lot. So I could feel like it just going through the story, it can make me feel for her. And I'm like, would have done the same thing? Or would I've just tried to like obey and just be miserable throughout this whole time and just because this is my lot in life, I'm a slave? Or would I run? I don't know, but I can understand more so of why she would. And I think sometimes as moms too, we might not know how, but we're going to do something. If we're trying to, I feel like that mom brain kicks in survival mode. I'm just trying to go. So maybe it's Egypt. Maybe somebody will pick me up on the way, but it's just that flight response, which we can't run from our problems translating today, right?
Hmm.
I'm not a slave of anyone, but I need to make sure I'm facing what's going on, so
Yeah. Yeah, no, I appreciate you even bringing up the fight flight, right? Because it's the whole fight flight. But some of us, there's a freeze and the fawn. And
yes.
so, she ran. And I know for me, I'm an emotional runner. And so I can relate to her in that space. I can relate to when things are tough, I run. And when whether I run physically or I run emotionally, I'm a runner. And here's this woman who, yeah, she's grieving, she's displaced, she doesn't have what's normal for her, what feels like home. And God finds her in the desert, and he says to
Hmm.
her, he says, first he says her name, then
Yeah.
he says that she's a servant of Sarai, and then he asks her these questions. And it could be, honestly, when I read this, I think, seriously, God, really, where are you going? Where are you heading? But there's this thing about God. He doesn't ask questions because he doesn't know. He asks questions because he wants us to consider and to think. If she's in her lizard brain, he's got to bring her to a place of reason. Like, oh, not even reason, to think, to stop, take a
Mm-hmm.
moment, take, you know, because at this point, think about, she is one of the at her lowest point emotionally, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
What have I done? She's probably angry. She's probably resentful. She's probably feeling like, like you said, I didn't do anything wrong, and look what is happening. This is not
Mm-hmm.
fair. She probably on that walk was thinking about that mess in her head over and
Mm-hmm.
over and, and over again, right? And
Mm-hmm.
isn't that what we do when we're in our desert?
For sure.
We sit and we think about stuff over and over. We ruminate
Yes.
on it.
Oh yes. Mm-hmm.
And, and there's a story we tell ourselves. Like, I wonder what story she was telling herself, right? There's this,
Mm-hmm.
have you ever heard of this thing called narrative psychology?
No.
Okay, it's really cool. It's a perspective in psychology where, basically it talks about the stories that we tell ourselves, how we tell
Mm.
our stories, and
Okay.
based so it kind of like we tell the stories the way we deal with experiences. So we can come from it very negative, right? If you ever
Right.
met someone who's super negative, oh, my family was the worst. I'm the black sheep. I've always been the one who's, or
Yeah.
you know what? My family had challenges, and I was definitely one who stood up for myself. And they come from a place of strength while others come from a place of
Sure.
weakness. So we can do that, right? We can tell
Oh
these
yeah.
stories. And I'm thinking, I think God wanted Hagar to really recognize what story she was telling herself. That's just conjecture on my part, obviously. But
Mm, yeah.
as I'm relating it to me, like, Hagar, where are you going?
Mm-hmm.
Where are you coming from? Like, what story is going on here?
Yeah.
Because he was about to rewrite her story.
Mm,
He was
mm.
about to give her a new one.
Wow.
And I
Yeah.
just
And
think
it's
this
hard to hear
woman,
from
yeah.
the I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No, no, go for it.
Um
Go for it.
it, it's also hard sometimes like to accept, right? When the Bible tells us hard things, right? Hard truths, hard
Yes.
things to do. And so to hear like him saying, go back and be a slave, I'm like, why?
Yes.
Why? How come she can't let her just can she have this baby and then just leave? Can they get somebody? I don't know. So I was thinking like, man, can Hagar just have this baby and then send the baby? Like, is there some type of other way this can happen? Because I definitely feel for her, but it can be hard to hear that. To go back, do I have to go back to this lifestyle, or can anything be changed? Is that all you got for me, Angel? Can is there something else? But it wasn't.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And I really appreciate you bringing that up. And I think even for us, as we are thinking through this woman, her experience, her challenge, her story, and her running, it, I get it. I relate. And I think what you brought up about going back, wait, what? Wait, what are you talking about? Did you not realize that I was being mistreated? Did you not realize that I had to sleep with this person to have their child, and it's
Mm,
not even my inheritance? Do you not realize what
mm,
I've been through? Wait, are you serious? And I think in our Christian lives, we can go through that, right? There's stories we tell ourselves. And I think one of the questions that I'd love to have our audience even think through is, and we'll discuss it ourselves, is what story are you telling yourself right now in your
mm,
current situation? Because that Hagar is an example of getting through that story and responding to God. Where
mm.
uh, sometimes the stories we tell ourselves, it makes it really hard to respond to God because it's so
Yeah.
countercultural, or it counters our feelings and our emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of the things that in this story is really important with Hagar is there were facts, right? Here's the facts, Hagar. You are a slave. You are
Mm-hmm.
Sarai's slave. You are Abraham's slave. And not not slavery as we know in America. America, we knew chattel slavery. You were owned, you were property, you had, you know, you didn't have a way of buying yourself out, you didn't have a way of getting out. Your child wasn't going to be taken as someone else's child, they would be taken as a slave. So, you know, it's a different
Mm-hmm.
kind of slavery. But the emotions and the feelings that you experience are similar because you do
Mm.
not have you don't have self agency.
Right.
It's been taken from you, and so she has zero rights, zero. She's running against, she's running, it's against the law. Honestly, her
Mm.
running away is
Mm-hmm.
against the law. And so
Yeah.
she's putting herself in a position where she can be punished severely or killed, whatever it is they deem necessary. um, and this is happening all under the hand of it is all under God watching, right? And he tells her to go
Mm-hmm.
back. So it could feel like, what the heck? These are the facts. What is going on here? I've been driven to the desert because of all of this, and you find me
Mm-hmm.
here. But there's
Yeah.
something God does that's really remarkable when he finds her in the desert, as we've been talking about before, is he makes space for her. When he asks her the questions, he's making space for her to go from
Mm.
lizard brain to, oh, wow, someone wants to know
Mm.
why. It,
Yeah.
and she does answer. She says, when he
Mm.
says, where have you come from and where are you going? She said, I am fleeing from my mistress Sarai. And
Mm.
so,
Mm-hmm.
what question is God? What do you feel like stories you're saying to yourself right now? What questions do you hear from God right now?
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to add too, Sam, is that kind of based on your filter that you have. I love that you talk about, how we retell our stories, right? If we were to retell a
Hmm.
situation, how will we retell it? And so I feel like for the longest time, and even now I still have to fight it, but it's so easy. And I'm sure for the brain itself, it is so easy, but just also because of how I was raised to always see the danger, you know, and I'm sure that was more of a for protection wise, but it's always see the danger, always see the bad stuff so you know how to act, so you know how to move accordingly. And so then that's how I would go through life. How do and I could retell my situations. Well, this didn't happen right, and that didn't happen, and I should have done this, but then this happened, and that sucked, and then just, can kind of go and retell the story without seeing um, the blessings, even the blessings in the hard times,
Hmm.
seeing the silver lining, seeing the, that there is still something in the midst of your trauma, your distress, your whatever that you can hang on to. But so it really does, it is really, I don't know, just another reminder for me as I'm going through life and whatever hardships that I could do. Like as of right now, looking for a job, it's easy for me, especially knowing how long it's been. It can feel like, oh, I shouldn't have left my job when I did. I should have just stayed till I got another job, or whatever, right? I made a big mistake. I made regrets, whatever, but knowing my reason to. I need to take a break. I wanted to seek for other opportunities as well that I really wanted to go after. And that it's a blessing that I'm able to leave a job without having one lined up because our bills are okay, right? Like instead of going through that, it can just feel like, oh my gosh, woe is me. I can't find anything that I want. Maybe I'm not good at this. I should change professions, all these things, right? But how I would tell my story. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so important to consider, right? Looking at the what you just did, you talked through the facts of your story. You said, "Hey,
Mm-hmm.
I'm able to leave my job. These are the facts," while not having another one lined up and it not being a financial detriment, it's not detrimental to my
Mm-hmm.
family.
Right.
That's the facts. But if when we don't face the facts, it could be very easy to come across very victim like a victim.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
And I think it's so important when you look at Hagar's story and we read about her story. I think God gave her the opportunity to look at some facts, and the facts weren't, they
Mm-hmm.
were kind of grim. Her facts weren't like yours. Yours was her facts were still grim. But what was the alternative? She was
Mm-hmm.
going to die in the desert.
Yeah,
She was.
that's true.
She if she continued, where was the water? How far
Right.
was
It's
Egypt?
very
Did you think
true.
through those things, Hagar? You
Yeah.
know, you're a woman alone in the desert. What if you come upon people who would harm you?
Mm-hmm.
You're
Right.
you're vulnerable. So in a lot of
Right.
ways of thinking through that, that it could be like, man, this is the worst situation ever, but the
Mm-hmm.
situation you're bringing yourself into is even worse.
Yeah.
It is
Yep.
and so I think sometimes in our stories, if we don't face facts, and sometimes the facts, yes, they're grim, but the alternative can be worse, you
Mm.
know?
Right.
And so important when we're telling our stories to go from survival and flight to taking the time to stop. And I think this is what God did is he wasn't when he asked for the questions, he wasn't launching an investigation or an interrogation. Really, he was
Mm-hmm.
intervening. He was
Yeah.
staging an intervention. Hagar, you if you go further, you're not going to make it. You're going to
Right.
die. And I have a
Yeah.
story for you. I have a better story for you. I've got something to rewrite. It may not seem like
Mm.
there's any good that's going to come out of it, but I've got something better for you. I am going to
Right.
rewrite this. Um, and I think what's interesting is when he says to her, go back to and submit to your mistress, go submit to her, he didn't take her out of her situation. He wasn't taking her out of her situation.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
sometimes in our story, when we tell our stories, the what we want, the ending we want is happily ever after, the way I want it, the way I
Yeah.
desire it. If you don't completely take me out of this situation, you're not for me. If
Mm-hmm.
you
That's
don't
very true.
part this Red Sea, then I don't want it.
Mm-hmm.
But God didn't, he didn't take her out of her situation. He said, go back.
Right.
Go back to the
Yeah.
mistreatment. Like go back to it. And I just sometimes I can't fathom that. How did she
Mm-hmm.
feel when she heard that? How do we feel when we feel stuck? Like, wait, if I
Mm-hmm.
go forward, I may die. If I go back, they may kill me.
Mm-hmm.
So in that moment, there's that entrusting herself to God.
Right. Yeah. And I love that God gave, God came to her and provided the space, right? To let's talk this out, girl.
Yes.
Like, and helping us to think. And I love when God sends people our way to do that. Um, when we're going through these times and we're running, and yeah, it's like just a warm hug, right? Because I'm sure nobody's asking her how she's doing, right? And she's pregnant,
Yeah.
like, she's working, she's doing her job. So, um, giving her that space, maybe not, but to know that God is, I'm going to provide the space. Let's talk this out. And I do appreciate what you said. I feel like it's like a hard teaching, like when the disciples say, who can this, what is this new teaching, or like this is so hard,
Hmm.
of you're still going to be in your situation. And I think sometimes, people trying to pursue a relationship with God, we think that if God is working, then that means it's the absence of these struggles. If God
Hmm.
is intervening, it's the absence of these hardships and challenges, when sometimes you're going to be in that same situation, but how will you think about it? How will you respond? You can only control you and not other people. And that we can't play God, because sometimes it's like, well, why would God allow this to happen? I feel like sometimes as humans, it's like we want God to intervene when we think it's appropriate, but then not in others. So it's kind of
Hmm.
like, God isn't our genie, but to know that this was a situation, this is the culture, and um, we're gonna make it through. And like how you said, God reassuring her that there is a plan for you, and even telling her, right?
Yes.
Telling her, giving her a little some, maybe give her some hope, right? To get back
Yes.
And so, yeah.
Yeah. And if you read and really take the time to look at this, God was sending her back because remember, he had a blessing on Abraham's house.
Mm, yeah.
He blessed that house. So technically, Hagar was under that blessing.
Mm,
And even she would be covered by God's blessing in that house, in that place.
yeah.
Where she was going to, she was walking away from that blessing. And it resonates with what you said. We could feel like it's doom and horrible and not the way we want, and we miss that there's a blessing there protecting us, even when it feels
Mm-hmm.
like this stinks, this is
Right.
horrible. I want it different. His hand was on the household. In fact, her daily meat, Hagar, you were eating, you were drinking, you were sleeping. You had everything you need. You're
Mm-hmm.
not going to get that where you're
Yeah.
going to starve out here. You may be eaten
Mm,
by wild animals out here. You may be mauled and,
mm,
you may be attacked out
yeah.
here. You have basic needs there.
Mm-hmm.
And that can feel like, well, I don't want basic needs. I want extra needs. I want more. But you had the
Yeah.
blessing of that there. And I just think in that time, and you said it, God really shows Hagar how she's going to share in that blessing
Yeah.
because she was able to say, wow, I am seen. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
invisible. He knew her name when she was there. I mean, he called her Hagar.
Mm-hmm.
And then he
Yeah.
said, you know, servant of Sarai. He knew her. So she's like,
Mm-hmm.
he saw her at her worst point, met her at her
Yeah.
worst point, and then even gave her, like you were saying, gave her that little sum. He says to her, I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count.
Mm.
Okay, here's the kicker. That is the exact same promise he gave to Abraham.
Yeah.
He gave it to Hagar too. And we
Mm-hmm.
miss that sometimes.
Yeah.
We miss that. He gave her the same blessing. This was Abraham's blessing.
Mm-hmm.
This was the covenant God made with Abraham a chapter before. And so he gave that to her and
Yeah.
he validated her. He rewrote her story. The story she would tell isn't I'm this unseen, not valuable, no
Mm-hmm.
self agency, zero rights, zero, I had a child and, was mistreated. That's not the story. He rewrote
Yeah.
her story. I have seen the one who sees me.
Mm-hmm.
I have been given a promise. My descendants will outnumber stars too.
Mm.
That blessing is for me too. And I am blown away by God's grace here. I'm blown away by just what he did for Hagar in that desert. It still blows my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not something when, in the beginning you said, well, we don't really talk about Hagar that much. Yeah, we talk about Abraham's promise all the time. We talk
Mm.
about that covenant that he had with God
Yeah.
all the time. But we don't talk about that God said to Hagar, I will increase your descendants so much
Yeah.
that it will be too numerous to count. She too had a promise. And that is blow away for me. And so I just think this is what God does for us when we trust him, when we
Mm.
stay faithful, and when we commit to his word, especially when life gets difficult, especially when life gets difficult. He
Yep.
rewrites our story. He opens our eyes to see that we can get through this. I think, uh, how did my ancestors do this? How were they able to
Mm-hmm.
hold faith in a time
Mm-hmm.
when they were not regarded even as human?
Mm-hmm.
And they got a little bit of God and they held on so much. Who am I in my day and age to
Mm.
have so many more of the blessings that they only wish they could have? to
Yeah.
condemn God because of how someone may see me or how someone may treat me or how, so this goes so much beyond being a woman of color, being a foreigner, being an immigrant, like all of those things I resonate with. And sometimes based on how I'm treated because of those things, whether in the church or in the world, I can be
Hmm.
quick to want to blame God and be the victim and forget, wait, my boundary lines have fallen in pleasant places.
Mm, yeah.
Do I trust God? Can I
Hmm.
respond to God?
Yeah.
Like this woman responded to God and went back to her mistreatment.
Yeah.
She was, so there's so much more to this story, but I think that's one of the things that
Right.
really, yeah,
Yeah.
sticks out for
Um,
me.
Something I wanted to share too is this is it's probably more so on Sarah than Hagar, but it makes me think of what is it in Galatians, right? How we reap what we sow. And sometimes I'm
Mm,
like, now, Sarah girl, I'm sure it was hard. I am sure, right? It's like hope deferred
mm,
makes the heart sick. I get it,
mm-hmm,
and so I could just think now, you're over here mistreating this woman after what you told her to do. Sometimes I'm
mm-hmm,
just like, oh, I know that's what we can do too, right? As humans, as women, we
mm-hmm,
get mad for the decision we made. Like we made
mm-hmm,
our bed, so you gotta lay in it. Like this is your decisions. Here's the consequences of this, and now you don't like it. And it makes me think just for women, I mean men too, but just think about what you're gonna do before you do it. Think about
mm-hmm,
what you're going to say before you say it. Like, be cautious, be careful, think through things. I feel like generally speaking, but sometimes it just makes me laugh because I'm like, I can relate in a general way. I have not been in that situation like Sarah, but just like pause, take a beat. Things are getting frustrating for you. You're like, look, I'm running out of time. Everybody around me is probably having all these children, popping out all these boys, you know? Like, when is it going to be my time? And so
mm,
it's like, now look what you did, and now you're mad. And it's like, girl, that's your fault. That's your fault that you're over here hating on Hagar.
mm-hmm,
Um, and it's not, and who knows, what if Hagar ended up not being able to conceive? You like
mm,
you don't know, like you don't know until you try, but she was able to, but
mm-hmm.
um you don't know what that story could have been like for her. But I love how God, even if it wasn't supposed to be that way, I use that because who knows, God wills things, right, for the greater good. And that's
Yeah.
something that is encouraging to me in my life. If I'm sure, for example, God probably intended for my mother and my father to be together and to be married and to grow up in a two-parent household and to get that love and training and discipline, right?
Mm-hmm,
That's not my story, right? But how do you
mm,
will that around so I can learn the things I need to learn to be ready for life? So it's
mm,
just like it might not look the way we want it to look, or even maybe how God said, but God wills it around, and that He still gets the glory, and that He will provide a way for us to work through things, even if we make decisions that we're like, no, that probably wasn't the best decision. So
yeah.
that just encourages me to see, even through what Sarah did, how that affected Hagar, and how that, just turned the situation in a different way.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jazz, to show that just because something has occurred or we've been treated badly doesn't mean God can't use will things to get us to a good place, back to the blessings and to bless us and change our
Yes,
story. I think that's so
right.
good. And even as you brought that up, this is something as women we really need to consider because Sarah actually did to Hagar what Abraham did to her.
Hmm. Say
When
more,
they went
Sam.
to Egypt, when they went to Egypt, Abraham told Sarah because he didn't want to be killed. He didn't want to be threatened by Pharaoh. He didn't want to lose his life. Because she was so beautiful, he said, "Tell them you're my sister." And he
Hmm.
actually gave her to the Pharaoh.
Yeah.
So she would have been in his harem. Sarah would have been in his harem.
Mm.
And God saved Sarah. God saved
Wow.
Sarah.
Yep.
So Sarah turns around, and that's probably how they got Hagar, as a gift as they were leaving, right?
Mm.
Sarah, girl,
Makes sense.
this is what your husband, your Abraham, did to you. He gave
Mm.
you to someone else, and God
Mm.
saved you.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to turn around. Yes, culturally, it is appropriate because she belongs to you. She's your maidservant. But there's a way culturally to do that without all the mess.
Mm-hmm.
You did to
Yeah.
that woman, you did to her
Mm-hmm.
what was done to you. How do we not? And I think as women, we can lose that ability to commiserate with each other in a healthy way, to empathize with each other, not commiserate, but to empathize actually with each
Mm-hmm.
other in a way where we can be tougher. We can overlook like our pain is more than someone else's. You
Mm.
know, our needs are greater than someone else's, and it's just so important for us to realize as women we need to sit with each other and empathize with each other and put ourselves in each
Yeah.
other's shoes, because had Sarah done this, we may have had a different story as well,
Yeah.
right? We were still going to have Isaac, or that the son who was going to multiply
Mm-hmm.
the stars. God would have made it happen somehow, some way. He would have willed something, because that's what
Mm-hmm.
he does. But all that hurt and pain and
Mm-hmm.
disaster and just all
Yeah,
these
it's
things that
messy.
come with it, messy. It don't have to be so messy,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and, but it is, and we experience this as women. There's just a mess. It's like if we would only see each other
Yeah.
culturally, and
Yeah.
and and, and help each other and meet each other. Go, my needs, my wants are similar to her
Right.
needs, her wants, because we're women.
Mm-hmm.
If we
Mm-hmm.
would come together in that space under the umbrella of God's grace, we can be a stronger church. We can be
Yeah.
a stronger community. So much really comes back to, if we can just see each other through the lens of Christ, it makes a
Mm-hmm.
difference. That actually
Yep.
supersedes me seeing someone as a white person or them seeing me as a black person. Or
Mm-hmm.
if we are first able to see each other, that's God's daughter.
Mm.
Primarily,
Yeah.
that's God's daughter. It makes a
Yeah.
huge difference. And so I just think
Yeah.
it's so important for us to remember God is in control, and God
Mm.
is the one who writes our stories. And
Yeah.
if we can just hold on to Him, if we can just view each other through that lens, if we can just remember that He hears us, He
Mm.
hears us, which is what He says to her, right? When He tells her to name their child, her child.
Mm.
He says in verse 11, you are now pregnant and you will give birth to a son, and you shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery. That's what Ishmael means. The Lord hears
Mm.
you.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
I think I love how God does this. He does these things where you're like, whoa, wait, did God just he gave her a name that anytime she calls her child. Imagine going,
Mm.
Ishmael, Ishmael, come
Right.
here. Ishmael, do this. Ishmael, do that. Well, really, what's happening here is God,
Mm-hmm.
in that moment, she's remembering, oh, God hears me. Ishmael, God hears me.
Right.
Ishmael, God hears. Ishmael, take out the water. God
Yeah.
helps me. Ishmael, go to the well. God hears
Mm-hmm.
me. And I love how God does that. He is
Yeah.
omnipresent, right?
Yeah.
He says, name him this, because I hear you. I have
Yeah.
heard your misery. And
Yeah.
how amazing is that? That woman
Yeah.
could, God reminded her of his presence every day.
Right. It's really beautiful. Yeah.
Yes. every day. And I just, he's so intentional. It's kind of what
Mhm.
Acts 17 talks about, how the time and place, like God, he sets the times and place where we should live. Nothing is happenstance or
Mhm.
coincidental. And
Yeah.
Hagar was meant to be in that family. What happened was not his will, but like you said, he will better, and
Mhm. Amen.
I think, look at this woman who's able to she's able to see God's faithfulness every day when she looks at her child, when she calls
Right.
his name. Um, it's a message she couldn't get away from, you know?
Right.
But
Right.
for us in our day and age, the message that we cannot get away from is the cross of Christ.
Mhm.
You know, one of the things when he tells us to take communion, every
Mhm.
time we do, we
Yeah.
remember in remembrance. So just like she had that constant reminder when she said, Ishmael's name, we have that constant reminder when we as Christians take time to commune with God, when we take the time to
Mhm.
have our communion with him, when we say the name of Jesus Christ,
Yeah.
it's that reminder that, wait, he's with us.
Yeah.
He can change our
Amen.
story. He can change our story. Like he he's our saving grace. He gives us opportunity to see different, to think different, to to view life and situations, and to
Mhm.
retell our stories from a place of strength and not a place of weakness. To retell our
Yeah.
stories from the I am seen by God. So I just really appreciate that. I just really appreciate the God sees me. You are
Yeah.
the God who sees me. And I think
Yeah.
as we kind of pull it together, it's leaving our audience with remembering God sees you.
Mm.
You
Period.
may not, period, period,
With the T.
right? He
Yeah.
sees
Mhm.
you when you feel invisible. He sees you.
Mhm.
And I love that. I just, oh, I don't know. Many times we can walk into a space or we can walk into a room and we can just feel invisible. Or we can
Yeah.
go through situations and not feel like there's someone to really,
Man.
that maybe people don't see us, they see what we can do. They
Mhm.
see what we can give. And I felt that so many times, like I'm a tool. I
Yeah.
don't, not a tool in that sense, but I'm transactional. Relationships are
Mhm.
so transactional. It's what I can do for someone, how I can meet a need for someone, and can
Yeah.
feel very overlooked. But God's like, no, you're
Right.
not overlooked. I see you.
Mhm. Yeah.
This, I think Hagar fled and God found her. He saw
Mhm.
her face. He
Mhm.
loved her. He reached out to her in her darkest moments. And I don't
Right.
quite know what our audience is going through at this time, but I think this woman's story is a powerful reminder that no matter where we are in our grief journey, God
Mm.
is He's always looking at us with compassion. He is
Mm. Amen.
always seeking to get close to us. His grace is so sufficient. And I think you said it earlier. There is no tidy, neat, everything in a bow for Hagar. It's not like,
Mhm.
oh, and happily ever after, like Cinderella and and Beauty and the Beast. And there is no
Right.
happily ever after here.
Yeah.
She gets to go back to her messy situation.
Right.
She gets to give birth and then have more angst, more issues, and get sent away again, by the way.
Mm.
She does get eventually sent away again, but she has the promise now. She has a
Yeah.
promise that God has given to her. She's different. She's
Yeah.
walking around with different energy. Her energy is different. She got big
Mhm.
energy,
Right.
but it's a big energy that comes from a being seen by
Yeah.
God,
Right.
knowing that
Yeah.
there's more purpose. So I
Right.
really appreciate the story. I really appreciate just the lesson of resilience and faith
Mhm.
that we're able to glean here from Hagar. And
Yeah.
I don't know what, again, our audience is going through, but I pray that you can go back and you can look at Hagar and you can see her
Yeah,
differently. You can add legs to her story. She's not just a
right.
blip in the page. She's just not the handmaid servant. She's not the one Abraham slept with and then, had
Mm-hmm.
Ishmael. And she's not just that. She's so much more. And she's so relatable to many of us who've
Yeah,
been victimized, who are foreigners, who feel invisible, who are going through a particularly grievous time in our faith and feeling like God has forgotten us or doesn't see us. Hagar tells
yeah,
us something different. And I am
right.
so grateful for that story.
And I too want to encourage those listening too to have just scriptures that you can have that can put a little pep in your step, that can encourage you. I'm so glad you brought up the point of, now Hagar probably looked at her situation differently. She knows his promise. She knows that she's seen. She knows that God is with her and God cares. And I think when you walk that way, you do walk differently. You do talk
Mm,
differently. You do see life
mm-hmm,
a little differently, right? Your situation might not have changed,
mm-hmm,
um, but how you approach it, how you deal with it, how you think about it, what you will do about it, um, could change. So I just like that. It
mm.
makes me think, man, what's a scripture that I can hold on to that now I can see my situation or just, I can see that differently and knowing that God is with us. You
Yes. So I hope this episode was super helpful for you. I do
Yeah.
love stories that God allows in the Bible, and especially when they're not stories that are neat and tidy and easily explained, but that bring about
Mm-hmm.
even more wrestling and
Right.
questions, and so it's really a great thing to dig deeper. So as you study out Hagar a bit more today, if you have any questions or thoughts about Hagar, please feel free to put it in our podcast on what is that
Yes.
website again?
It is www.unpresentablepартspod.com. Yes,
Wonderful.
please
And
leave us
so please leave
comments.
us, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes, comments, questions, anything you would like to add, things you would like to see next. But we do have some things coming up next before we go. Can you let them know, Sam?
Yep. Next week, not next week, but next Unpresentable Parts Eve edition, the next time you get to listen to us again, we will be talking about Tamar. And I am
Mm-hmm.
really excited about this one. It's Tamar, Judah's wife, and woo, well, Judah's daughter-in-law, and on and on. Well, listen, you'll understand why I said that, but um, I am excited because that story is even messier than Hagar's. And I love that God has put in the Bible, but just really
Mm,
being able to see her righteousness in
yeah.
big mess. So
Mm,
excited to have been with you guys today. Look forward to
yes.
our next time when we take on Tamar.
Awesome. Have a good one, guys.
Bye, guys. Have a good one.